it's Merce. Welcome back to my channel where I review horror books with a supernatural focus. In today's video, I have two books that I started reading a few days ago, and I just wanted to share with you the beginnings of them, what's going on, what the writing is like, and maybe you might want to pick these up. And I also have something fun. I have a little book mail from Cameron Chaney from Library Macabre, so very excited to share that with you. We have a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and just jump right in. Be sure to like and comment and subscribe if you would like to get more videos from me. So here is the package. I have not opened it yet, but I did score it, so it'd be really easy to open right now. Ooh, it's in bubble wrap, which is so nice. And it is the Autumn Crow High Fresh Hell. And this is a series that Cameron is doing. It's very cool. If you read his short story collection, like a couple years ago, I believe it was called Autumn Crow. I can't exactly remember because I don't have my books with me here. Actually, I do have a virtual library on my phone, which I was bragging about some months ago and haven't really used lately. It's called Bookshelf. It's a pretty cool app. It's what you think it is. It's a virtual library of everything that you have. So yes, it is called Autumn Crow. And this is a really wonderful short story collection that was just really filled with the joy and nostalgia of Halloween. And in this short story collection, all of the stories revolve around this town called Autumn Crow. So he did this spin-off, which was Autumn Crow High, and it's very cool. I'm very excited to get to read it. You probably recognize the artwork on the front. It's by Cameron Rubinique. He did the covers for Regina St. Clair's short story collections that she was doing for horror BookTube, like Lurking in the Dark and such. Oh, and there's goodies inside. There's a bunch of stickers. It says, "They're all going to laugh at you." This is from, I want to say Carrie. Is that the name of it? I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's Carrie. This one's from Scream. It says, "Not in my movie." There is a Shining reference here as well with the twins on the carpet. It's very cool. Of course, we got Chucky. Oh, there's a pinhead in here. My favorite. And of course, guess who? These stickers are really amazing and super nice. I don't know where they came from, but they're awesome. There's also two bookmarks in here. So one is a promotional bookmark for, looks like, the Autumn Crow short story collection. That's what the cover looks like. You can also go to the QR code and follow his author journey. And on the back, there's this really wonderful picture of Cameron looking dazzling as ever, and it says horror author, host of Library Macabre on YouTube, Bookstagrammer. Definitely check out his channel if you haven't seen it. He has the most amazing library. It's like the library of your dreams if you're just kind of like into making your library like a whole entire lifestyle, but more on the spooky side, you know, focusing on 90s and 80s books. And it's really cool, trust me. It's definitely one of those things that you don't want to miss. And there's a really cool bookmark here from Terracore Publishing. It has a skeleton peeking in the doorway. It says Doors of Darkness. There's also a really nice note in here. It's very sweet. A few years ago, for one of my Halloween specials when I was still doing them, I read one of his short stories, Pumpkin Light, as a ghost in the cemetery. And I really enjoyed doing that. And he kind of mentions that in this little message. So it was very sweet. The design of this book is really phenomenal. I love it. It has this feeling of something you'd probably see in the 90s, which is very cool. But I should probably tell you what it's about. So Autumn Crow High, school is back in session. Fresh hell, what is this about? He's the boy of her dreams. I think he's talking about me. This is the boy of my dreams. School is back in session at Autumn Crow High. Will the class of 1994 survive long enough to graduate, or will the cursed town of Autumn Crow devour them all? Bailey Hagen is plagued by nightmares, blood-soaked visions of a boy seemingly from another time. He's so handsome, so dark, so deadly. Yeah. When Bailey returns to school in the fall, she is horrified to learn that the boy from her dreams is real and is attending Autumn Crow High. Are Bailey's dreams a warning, some kind of premonition? Or has the boy truly escaped her nightmares? Only time and murder will tell. So this sounds really fun. And I'm not really a big YA person, but Cameron's writing it doesn't feel like YA to me, you know? So I enjoyed the short stories so much, so I know I'm going to probably really enjoy this as well. So thank you so much to Cameron Chaney for sending this to me. It was very sweet and I'm very excited to read it. So the first book that I want to introduce you to is Through the Night Like a Snake. This is a short story collection by Latin American horror authors like Mariana Enriquez, Claudia Hernandez, Monica Ojeda, Camila Souza Vilada, and more. The book is very unusual in that it's kind of square, but it also has like some design elements in it as well for the starting of the new short stories, which is nice. And I have read the first 2 stories to this. And I picked it up because, one, I loved the cover. I felt like the cover artwork just had a really cool vibe to it. And also the kind of short descriptions of what's inside of this book just sounded pretty good. Like, a boy explores the abandoned house of a dead fascist. I love abandoned places, I love dark histories, so I feel like that's just written for me. A sex worker discovers a dark secret among the nuns of the Pampas. I don't know what the Pampas is, but I do like dark secrets and nuns together, yes. And there's also Kermit the Frog who dreams of murder. I feel like I've heard this short story before because it sounds very familiar, and it's such an odd premise. I feel like it must have been somewhere else, but I'm looking forward to it. It sounds kind of fun, kind of creepypasta-y or something. So the first story that I read is Bone Animals by Tomas Downey, translated by Sarah Moses. And let me just tell you the gist of this story. So this story is about a young, poor family who is basically living on the poverty line. And at some point, they're told by one of their neighbors or something that there's a shack that's in the woods or the forest, and no one's living there. No one's claimed it. There's a little bit of land around there where you could plant stuff, and why not move in, you know? So this family picks up their meager belongings and they head to this shack. And once they get there, you know, it doesn't look that great, but it is something. So they start cleaning it up and trying to make it nice and just organizing it. And as they're cleaning and sweeping and all these things, they begin to find these small bone carvings of animals. And the carvings are really intricate. And as the days go by, they kind of find more and more. Now, the unsettling part is that the husband, so he seems to be very lethargic and very reluctant to do anything. The wife is getting concerned because she thinks this is very strange. And maybe these bone animals and maybe this shack was abandoned for a reason. So the story kind of goes on from there, and then we have a kind of, you know, conclusion as to what happens with this family there. The story is written very well. I loved the pace, the writing. I thought was very beautiful. But it's one of those stories for me where it's like nothing's really happening, and then there's kind of an abrupt ending. And so those aren't really my favorite type of horror stories. I feel like those are really good for people who don't read horror and they don't like horror, but they kind of like something sort of weird and eerie and sort of ambiguous. So if you like those kind of stories, you'll really love this. I think it was very beautifully written. I just like a little more flesh on my bone animals, you know? So the next one I read was so good though. And this is That Summer in the Dark by Mariana Enriquez, translated by Megan McDowell. And this story, I loved it. It's a little bit like a vignette of a summer. So we start out meeting these 2 girls who are teenagers, and they're also very gothy. They are super bored because they're teenagers and they kind of live in a small town or whatever. But they end up finding this book on serial killers, like at a flea market, and they pick it up and they become obsessed with it. Like they just too much, to be honest, like too obsessed. Like one character is finding herself like romanticizing being with Richard Ramirez, which he's so gross. But anyway, they really get into it so much that they sort of become experts on the topic of serial killers. And you know, they're trying to share their newfound obsession with like their parents and with other people, but they're just like, you know, like, we don't care, this is weird. So the girls kind of just end up keeping to themselves and discussing to themselves until one day when someone in their apartment complex ends up murdering his wife and his daughter. So they become very interested in this crime and what's happened and why it's happened, and if they can catalog him as a serial killer or whatever. So it's really cool. Like, it's just written in a way that's really nice because it's giving you not just like the girls and their obsession and the murder, it's also giving you a taste of what it's like to be in Argentina in this time in the, I think it's like the 80s or the 90s. So we get a glimpse into like the politics that are going on there. There is a bit of an AIDS crisis going on. There's poverty. There's also these rolling blackouts of electricity that are happening. So there's this whole entire thing going on. And it was a really spectacular short story. So with short story collections, I usually temper my expectations a lot. I'm expecting to like at least one short story. I don't think I've ever read a short story collection where all of them were great. So I'm always like, if there's at least one, it's totally worth it. So for this, even though the first story, wasn't for me, I still thought it was really well written and really beautiful. But the second story was completely satisfying to me as a horror reader. So I'm just looking forward to getting through more of these stories. So the next thing I started to read was this one. And I was only planning on reading like 20 or 30 pages, but I read about 64 pages, which I only reluctantly put it down because I was tired. This really drew me in. And the only other Clive Barker book that I have read is Books of Blood, or Hellbound Heart, I'm sorry. And I really love that book and it was very enjoyable and I liked it, but the writing in this is a little different and it's just really fabulous. So this book is about Hollywood and it's kind of creating some mythology about, I don't know, the mythos of Hollywood in a little bit. But it's about Hollywood. It's about how dark it can be and how awful it can be. This is something specifically written by Barker, who was very unhappy with, I guess, how his experiences were in Hollywood. And he wanted to write those into a story, so that's what happens here. So we have a film star who's kind of fading, or he thinks he's fading, and he goes and he gets plastic surgery, and he kind of hides himself away in his house in the canyon or whatever. But this house has something going on with it. Something's gonna get unleashed, and all hell's gonna break loose, like something like that. So I'm gonna tell you what happens in the first 30 pages. It starts in Romania, great setting. And it starts in Romania in the 1920s. And there's this man, he's a manager, and he has a actress that he manages, and they are there back in Romania so that she can visit her family. But while he's there, he meets up with this, I guess he's a priest or a monk of some sort, at this fortress. And it's a very famous fortress within the area. It has a very dark past. But this monk wants to sell something to this American, because Americans love to shop and buy stuff and they're in need of some money.
I love to shop. I love to shop.
So he brings the American to the fortress and he's like, we got a lot of antiques. Do you want to buy any of them? And he's like, well, I'll only buy them if they're unique, because my actress, Katya, she only wants things that are unique, period. She's a collector, and that's what she does. So they kind of go through the fortress, and there's just really nothing interesting there. So eventually the monk is like, wow, we could go down to the crypt. And so the manager, whose name is Zephyr, he's like, okay, if there's something cool down there, let's go. So they walk down these stone steps. You can imagine it. You've seen it. There's these stone steps in some type of monastery. But before they descend completely down into the bowels, the monk brings out this bottle of brandy and some glasses. And he's like, you're going to need to drink this. Because it is so cold down there, you're going to have to drink this to stay warm. So they throw back a bunch of these brandies and they descend down into this space. And the space is huge. It's a huge crypt. And in here are all kinds of things like furnitures and books and whatnot, whatever. It was kind of being used as a storage room of sorts. But there's something kind of hidden behind all of this stuff that catches Zephyr's eyes. And it's these tiles. And these tiles are very intriguing to him because they are depicting these scenes of debauchery, terror, and horror, and gore, and just hell, basically. And he finds them to be the exact kind of unique thing that Katya might like. So he makes a play for the tiles, And it's something that the monk kind of reluctantly agrees to, but in the end, he seems pretty satisfied with what they're going to exchange for it. And the tiles are then arranged to be shipped to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, to Coldheart Canyon. I don't want to tell you too much more about, what's going on there, but what I want to share with you are like some of the descriptions and some of the things that Zephyr says about Hollywood, which I think, just beginning with this stuff of what he's saying, you can kind of start to tell the kind of like vitriol I think that Barker has for Hollywood. So one of the things that he talks about is like how cheap and vulgar Hollywood is, basically, because especially during this time in the 1920s, people were building their bungalows and their houses in the styles of like all kinds of weird shit, like one person will have like a German castle, another one will be like a Mexican ranch house. They just like appropriated like all these themes and like made them very badly. They're kind of silly, in a way. And Zephyr really hates this. Unfortunately, he has to live in Hollywood, so he kind of is like surrounding himself with objets d'art, which is just kind of like beautiful things that he actually buys from Europe and imports them. And that's kind of like how he's surviving, how he's like able to make it through the day. But he says that these objets d'art would suffice until they could find a chateau in the Loire or perhaps a Georgian house in London. Somewhere the cheap theatrics of Hollywood wouldn't curdle his blood. So he's very like, even though he's in the industry, he is very like anti the culture, I think, of the industry. So I think this is like a real reflection of Barker's feelings. I did want to read to you like one description of the tiles, because I just want you to see like how crazy it is. Through one of the windows, a man could be seen spread-eagled on a table, around which sat a number of guests, all watching a large worm enter him anally and then erupt from his open mouth. Another was a scene of a strange summoning in which a host of blackbirds with human heads rose up from the ground, circling a girl child who was either their invoker or their victim. In a third house, a woman was squatting and shedding menstrual blood through a hole in the floor. Several men, smaller than the women above by half, were swimming in the water below and undergoing some calamitous transformation, presumably brought on by the menses. Their heads had flowed into dark, monstrous shapes, demonic tails, and sprouted from their backsides. If that doesn't remind you of Bosch, Hieronymus Bosch, I don't know what does. And what's really funny is there is a character that pops up later on in the 60 pages that I read whose last name is Bosch. So I felt pretty proud of myself. I was like, yeah, I think that's a connection. But the descriptions are vivid, they're beautiful, they're terrifying, they're gross, really fascinating. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg with these tiles. It was dazzling, I'd say. The fortress itself, there is this really beautiful description of the fortress going from its state when Zephyr was there, through a few years of decay. And it's pretty rare when you can read like 2 to 3 pages about a building decay and be totally into it. That to me was probably like the coolest thing, because I feel like something like that is very hard to translate into words over a long period of pages, and to keep you interested and to be able to visualize it and to feel like it's so it just feels like a time lapse, like you're watching a time lapse. It was so awesome. A few people did comment on this book on my last video, and they were telling me how much they loved it. Some of them had binged it. It was like something that they couldn't stop reading. I mean, there are things about this book that I know that I'm not there yet. There's a lot of Hollywood lore. There's a supposedly amazing erotic scene. I mean, Barker says that, so I don't know, but want to check that out. And it's thoroughly disgusting from what he says also. So that was my reading vlog. That's what I've been reading in the last couple of days with this book, The Coldheart Canyon. This is the first time I was able to really sit down and just read 64 pages like straight away. That has not happened for me for a long time. So it feels really good to make that reading progress. I always feel like I'm never going to be able to read again. Like, is it going to come back, but of course it does. Everything has its cycle. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. And I hope that you pick up or check out one of these books at your library or pick it up at the bookstore. Other than that, please take care of yourselves, look out for each other, and I will talk to you next time.